Welcome to Mind Over Chatter.
This is the podcast that explores how leaders think, decide, and trust their inner guide.
Yes, I'm Heather Rogers.
And I'm Velia Amarasingham.
In today's episode, we'll be talking with Jeanne Marie Grumet. She is the CEO of Communication Catalysts. Jeanne Marie has worked with several Fortune 500 companies, including Kaiser Permanente, Lawrence Livermore Labs, and Clorox. Her rare blend of business acumen and deep insight into human behavior helps empower individuals and organizations to communicate with more clarity, confidence, and real authority.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're so excited.
I'm excited to be here too.
So Jeanne Marie is not only one of our dearest friends, she's one of our most treasured and trusted business advisors. And so we wanted to start off with a question. How did you start your business? And we'd like to know how you expanded it from there. But how did you start?
I started it accidentally a bit. I had always had in the back of my mind that I was entrepreneurial. But I got this vision of I was going to start in a very large corporation and then go to a corporation that was smaller and then somehow have my own business. So I got laid off. And it was not particularly pleasant, even though I was in a job where, this is kind of funny, but one day I said, God, I'm miserable in my job. Could you please help me? And God answered. I got fired the next day.
The next day?
It was the next day.
Wow.
And you could say laid off because other people got laid off as well. But it was hard on my esteem. And I said, okay, you've always wanted your own business. How about starting one? So I thought, well, what do I do? And I decided, okay, I'm going to give myself 60 days. I'm going to see how this goes. And the worst that happens is I go back into sales in corporate or I become a sales manager again. So I made some calls for informational interviews. I talked to this one guy and I said, can I come visit with you? And he said, I don't have time for lunch, but I can hire you. And I said, what? And he said, well, I have this thing we're doing, and it became a team building thing. And then from there, they liked my energy. They said, well, what do you do and how do you do it? And 2 weeks later, I got a call from them saying, can you teach sales? Wow. And quite frankly, I didn't have a sales course. But I answered the way a lot of entrepreneurs do with, sure.
You bet.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then I got off the phone and I thought, OMG, what am I going to do now? Because it was the days before the internet. I wasn't able to go to ChatGPT and say, help me write a sales course. I went, okay, I can do this. And 2 weeks later, I had a sales course. So I did that. And then what's interesting is that from there, a lot of entrepreneurs, we go up and down. Because I had said to God, I'm willing to do this for 60 days, but I'm not willing to go broke. And I was going into debt very quickly. So I did an ultimatum. And I said, God, you got 30 days to bring in business, otherwise I'm going. So business started. First it was a trickle, and then it really started pouring in after that. I was lucky. I was very blessed.
And so the expansion, tell us how you expanded it.
Well, it was really interesting because these days my pipeline's full a year in advance.
Oh, wow.
Not completely full. I have people I fill it in with. But I laugh when I think about and remember me starting 40 years ago when I went, I have nothing next month and nothing the month after that and nothing the month after that. And so it was really on a wing and a prayer. Mm-hmm. It truly was me praying and going, okay, Spirit, show me. And I learned pretty early on, which I'm very grateful for, to pray in a way where I said, okay, where can I best serve? Rather than, okay, give me, or I don't have enough, or how do I market? I mean, all those questions came up, and of course the thoughts. But a lot of it was, where can I serve? And once I flipped the framework to where can I serve, then it was magic. I would meet people on planes. I would go to a party and someone would say, oh, my husband works in corporate. He could really use what you have. And believe me, it took a long time to develop my confidence. I didn't even have business cards at first. I remember a guy asking me, well, can I have a card? And I'm like, yeah, but I got to get them from the printer first. So then, it taught me a lot about faith, quite frankly, because it wasn't easy.
I've always heard that artists live on faith.
Yeah. It wasn't easy. I think having a background in sales and psychology really helped because I knew that I had that in my back pocket. It was not what I wanted to do as a full-time job, but I always had that bit of security that I could sell and that I wasn't going to starve. Now, sometimes people ask me and I go, it's a really good idea to have 6 months of living income before you start a business because it makes it easier. On the other hand, how many people, you're probably saying to yourself, yeah, that would be nice. How many people really have that? And I started with nothing, quite frankly. I went into debt on credit cards, which I would not ever do again. But it was what I did at the time. And I just followed my faith and my heart.
I love that.
The other thing, too, is that I watched where doors opened. I think starting a business, I've coached other people, and they go, I keep hitting one obstacle. There's something about being on your own that, of course, there are obstacles to go through. And any entrepreneur will tell you there have been hard times, believe me. At the same time, doors opened easily in the respect of my work. And so that's what I believe you look for is where is that door opening and where is it aligned with my heart and where is the synchronicity happening and where's that magic that I really believe you feel when you're on your path.
Which you're encoded for. You get into frame.
Yeah. And then it's you vision what you want. One of my friends, she unfortunately had passed away, and before she did, she looked me in the eyes and she said, do you remember sitting in your living room and having the 7 women around you where you visualized what you wanted? And I had forgotten. She said, you got every single one of those things you visioned except being on Oprah. And I said, well, there's still time.
There's still time. I feel chills.
Yeah. So that was a piece, too, was that I had a group of people around me that held the vision. Sometimes I had people say, well, there's so many communication experts out there. And I'd go, yeah, and I don't need every client. I need the ones that need me. So that's the other thing is that, if I had listened to some of those voices, including inside myself some days, of, well, there's so many of those, I would never have done it. And one little tag on to that is that for a while, I remember I got a couple of, not clients, but I was a subcontractor for a client, and it was kind of a miserable experience. I didn't like the guy I was working for. We weren't aligned. Not the client, although it was a very famous client that went out of business.
Okay.
Called Enron. So, but I remember thinking to myself, ooh, I need to visualize the clients I want, the kind of clients, and more than that, the kind of experience. So I started putting in my prayers and my affirmations and my thoughts. I want a client that loves me, loves my work. I do amazing things for them. There's synchronicity. I get paid well. I get paid on time. It's just a match made in heaven. And those kind of clients went out the window. But the better clients that I visioned came in.
That's magic.
That is magic.
You cast spells with your language. Abracadabra means as I speak, I create.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. You
you know
spoke
about
it.
magic.
Yeah, Miss Magician here is
Yeah.
rocking the world.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So
Yeah. So it's a refining process. It's not a one and done where you become, oh great, I'm out there and I'm a trainer. It's a revisioning and tuning into, who do I want to work with? That's what I do with my clients. I don't just create my program and it's in a box and I go there. I tune in each class, and with each client, even if I walk in thinking this is what we're going to do, I tune into what do they need. And that's been one of the secret sauces to my business.
to become a whisperer.
Yeah, in the moment. You know, it doesn't mean that I'm not planning and I just walk in and go, well, I'll just do what Spirit wants me to do. I plan, but then I tune in, I go, you know, I think this is going to work better with this client, and look at what's going on for the day. So that's one of the reasons I love working for myself, is I can do that.
Yes.
When I've taught other people's programs occasionally, I can't do that.
Because
I
you're
can do
locked
it.
into a particular program.
Time frame, you have to do
Right.
this, at this hour you do that.
Evaluations.
And that, so many times, is where the magic has been. To use that word again.
Wow.
I'm inspired. Did you have a couple questions?
I do. I'd actually like to talk to you about your leadership coaching, because we know that you have, over your wonderful career, coached a lot of Fortune 500 executives. So I want to talk to you about some of the personality traits that you see in common with a lot of these high-level leaders. Can you share a bit about your experience there?
Sure. It's interesting because I teach executive presence. So we really talk about what are the traits, and it's top of mind because I just taught a class in it. The traits that I really see in those executives, well, there's expertise. They're good listeners. And they really care about their people and what's going on there. So the ones that haven't been as effective, they are, what I've seen is they're very driven, and it's got to be my way or the highway. The leaders of today, certainly they have to make decisions every day and by the hour, but they take input and they care about what other people are saying. So they have a sense of charisma and caring and confidence in themselves that I've seen in almost every leader that's been successful.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm curious, when you first land in a training situation and people start communicating with you, this might be strange to convey the question. When they start communicating with you, what are some of the things you first notice that they're not aware they're conveying to you, whether it's verbal? Did you know what I mean by the question?
I do.
Well, go ahead. We'd love to know.
I look for what's going on with their body, right? And what's coming to mind is, this was more an interview situation, but I was talking with someone, and I taught interview skills for a long time. What I said is, are you organized? And she said, oh, I'm very organized. And I looked at her and I said, you love organizing? She said, I love organizing. And I said, where do you not like organizing, or you aren't organized? She goes, how'd you know? And I said, you just told me.
Oh, that's great.
Because the body doesn't lie. And she said, well, I'm not really very organized at home, but I am at work. And I said, well, that's good. So people often relay where they're not feeling so confident. One of the things that struck me lately, especially when I was teaching the Executive Power and Presence class, and one woman raised her hand kind of sheepishly and said, I have imposter syndrome. And then another person said, oh, I'm glad you said that, me too. And then another person said, me too. So we talked a lot about that, because one of the things that I see behind closed doors with a lot of executives and a lot of people I coach is, I don't want to say the image is not what's there, because there is a congruity in their credibility and their sense of themselves. And most people, if they're stretching themselves, are going through I'm doing things before I'm an expert.
Right.
And I would say for any entrepreneur, you know, I've gone through that myself. When I first, I met someone who said, I want to teach you to do what I do. I like your energy. And I said, well, what do you do? And she said, I teach presentation skills. I said, yeah, that's not happening. Because she said, why not? And I said, I'd feel like a fraud. I'm so nervous speaking in front of people. And she said magical words that I remember to this day. She looked at me and she goes, well, who better to teach people than someone that has to learn how to do it themselves?
Wow.
Because someone that was totally confident couldn't teach people.
They wouldn't have ears.
No. And that's what I relate to some of the people I'm coaching. It's you're going to be mentoring people. For you to walk through your own insecurity or fears or not knowing or trying, that's what we all do. I don't like calling it fake it till you make it. I like faith it until you make it.
Faith it.
There's a quote right there. We'll have to put that on the bottom right
Yeah.
here.
Faith it until
I've
you
never
make it.
heard that.
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. I still go through imposter syndrome every week at least, because someone will ask me to do something I don't know how to do yet, or they'll call me an expert and I go, yeah, go talk to my boyfriend. He doesn't think I'm an expert in communication skills.
If someone wants to immediately improve how they're perceived in meetings, what are some things that they can do today?
Wow, that's a big question. Let me give my best answers to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny because I just coached somebody this morning, and he's on video, so video versus being live. But one of the things I look at with people is, what's your posture saying? He was a little like this,
Okay.
right? So if you're slumped over like this, you don't look as confident. And I've talked to some women who say, I am being ignored in meetings. I got all these people around me, these executives, and they're ignoring me. And one of the things I say is sit up. Sit up.
Wow.
Take up space, because confident people take up space. Right? You know that. You use the stage really well. Both of you do. And so it's not going, hi, I'm here for this meeting, but it isn't shrinking. And a lot of people shrink. So not shrinking is one of the things. The other thing I would say is find your voice. Because a lot of people, they sit in meetings, they go, well, I don't know if I say that, da, 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 da. Find something you feel confident speaking about, or develop your confidence and raise your hand or speak up and have opinions about things that matter. Don't just shrink and let other people take over. The other thing I would say, thirdly, is to really observe what's going on and tune in. Because a lot of people don't use their intuition. They just go into a meeting and they kind of zone out.
Right.
So I find a lot of people are like, oh, okay, death by meetings.
Right.
They're on their 5th meeting for the day, and when they're on video, they're almost going through whiplash. Because it's one Zoom room, or one Teams room, and they're just going room to room to room, so they're exhausted. Now, one way you can also make yourself present is to, or if you get emotional, is to write, because that takes you into the logical part of your brain. So if you notice you're zoning out, rather than drinking another cup of coffee, which can hype you up, is start writing and write down ideas and look thoughtful, because that's the other thing that, fourthly, is that people do is they look disinterested. So they forget they're on.
Right. See?
You know, they just kind of, okay. I've done this in classes where I look around at the group and they're all kind of sitting like this. And I go, okay, you know, the director is coming in or the president's coming in just a moment. I wanted you to know because they really wanted to see what's happening in this class. So we want to get and I watch everybody sit up, pay attention to me. I go, wait a minute. Why did you just do that? Because I'll tell you, I lied. They're not coming in, but you just changed. So what am I, chopped liver? But you really are showing whether you're interested or being respectful. And that's an important thing. Wow. Now, here's one more, and that is plan before the meeting. Mm-hmm. Plan 3 bullet points that you might say that you want to speak up about.
That's a great one.
People don't plan. They don't think. They just show up and then they wonder why they don't have any thoughts. So to take the 3, and I can hear everybody out there going, I don't have time. Take the 2 or 3 minutes. That's all it takes. We have 60 to 90,000 thoughts a day. Take some of those thoughts and jot down, I want to talk about this, this, and this, so that you have something worthwhile to bring into the meeting.
I love that. And another tip is before, when you're going to a conference and it's going to be a really high profile person with influence on stage, I always go in with questions prepared.
Yeah.
Because I say, do you have questions? And people are hesitant, and that's when you have yours ready.
Yes.
Right? Because later you can't get your hand up. Everyone has prepared, you know, they've already warmed up. So preparing questions.
Exactly.
So I have a follow-up question to the transformation conversation. We're curious if you have an example of a story of a pretty dramatic transformation of one of your clients that happened fairly quickly, whatever that time frame is, and maybe a story about that, an example of someone being transformed.
Yeah, thank you for asking. There are a couple. One of them was very early on in my presentation skills teaching career. There was a woman who was really timid and really just terrified to get up in front of people. Most people have a fear of speaking.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the things, by the way, just a little aside, that I say to people is it's not about getting rid of the butterflies, it's about getting them to fly in formation. So you take your nervousness with you. I did not make up that quote.
That's beautiful.
But she was terrified, and we worked with her. There was an assistant there. I worked with her for a couple of days, and at the end of it, it was like she was transformed. She said, you know, I'm feeling so much better about myself. I'm going to go ask my boss for a raise.
Wow.
She did, and she got it,
Wow.
which was an amazing thing. You don't mind a second example?
I'd love
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, there was a guy that, I was working with a team, and they were going for a huge high stakes project, like multi millions. In fact, even larger than that. I don't want to give it away. But he talked to the floor. He would pace. He talked so quickly you could barely understand him. There was no eye contact going on. And he said, all right, I want to go get my feedback now. And I said, okay. We went in a private room, and I said, how do you like your feedback? He said, straight up. I said, are you sure? And he said, yes, really brusquely. And I said, I wouldn't hire you. And he looked like someone slapped him, because no one talked to him like that.
Right.
He was the head of the company.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, I may be getting myself out of a job. I have a responsibility. He goes, why not? And I said, there's no connection going on. And you're talking to the floor. You're pacing. You talk so quickly, it's not about comprehension for anybody else. It's about you spouting what you want to say. He goes, all right, what do I need to do? And we worked and worked on what he was doing, and they got the job.
Wow.
Now, would they have gotten it if he hadn't done that? I don't know. But I was being really frank with him. And coincidentally, after that, I was the go-to person for him. because he knew I was going to be honest. It was a risk, but sometimes being an entrepreneur is about risking.
Yeah.
You have to take those calculated risks and go, I have to do my job, because there are other times that I did not do that. There were earlier times where I went, and I don't want to ruffle feathers. I don't want to make somebody upset. That people pleaser in me, maybe some of you can relate to that.
Yeah.
That people pleaser in me wanted to be liked. But I have a bigger responsibility. And when I own that and listen to it and tune in to what that person needs, it's rarely off.
I got a big feedback from you that we're going to use, this idea of how do you like your feedback? How would you like this delivered? Can I asking permission? May I deliver this? Because when permission is granted, it's a whole new level of listening.
Yeah. I think it's your approach as well, because, something that we always talk about is a difficult conversation doesn't actually have to be, doesn't have to sound or feel difficult. You approach things in such a measured and centered and gentle way. I think that's why you can be direct. Again, you've asked permission, but I think that's why you can do that and people respond to you, because you're not at all being confrontational in your tone. And I think that's a huge takeaway. I think listening to you speak.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I sometimes say I try not to make people cry. There have been a couple of times in coaching presentation skills where people were so tender that I misestimated. And I said something, and I have that very direct part of me, right? And I go, oopsie. But I also have to remember that people go through their own process, and sometimes you just have to let them cry.
Yeah.
Or have their reaction.
A release.
Yeah, and when you're making transformational change as you are, I am sure that, you're encountering the full spectrum of emotion.
Well, and you're bringing up a really good point about asking for feedback, because a lot of executives guess, or they give feedback the way they want it, which is a misstep. Or there's this thing out there of give 4 positives to 1 negative. It doesn't work really well for some personality types.
It's interesting. We haven't talked about personality types. I know that's another one of the trainings you do. You do so many trainings. But there are different health types that want to just work alone. There's ones that need to be connected. There's ones, the crusaders are going to just tell it to you. And
exactly.
There's different ones. So I want to hear a little about that. And in the context of a very interesting question, because we're mentalists, we love the concept of mind reading and the science. We're curious if the great communicators are employing any sense of mind reading or something else. What could be going on in your estimation?
Oh, wow. Well, and I love what you two do. I mean, I've experienced it, so it's amazing. I would say it's a tricky one, because one thing I ask clients is, what's your gut? What's your gut feeling here? And the brain, the gut has a brain that feeds the mind. So that's one reason that I believe when people say I have a gut feeling. From where I sit, really great communicators tune in. And there's a sensitivity. They're also watching body language as our first language. And most people don't remember that, because now we're so fluent and verbal. But we notice stuff, we track it, but we don't know necessarily that we're tracking it. There's a baby down the street from me, and I watched him, and he was just tracking eye movement and smiles. And I thought, oh, it's so amazing. So the people that are really good communicators, if I could teach only one skill, it would be listening.
Wow.
And listening meaning that you really ask good questions and listen with all your senses for the answer. You listen between the lines. So I really believe, we talk about intuitives. I happen to have been born fairly intuitive. But even people that aren't intuitive, and I am going to use air quotes because some people go, well, I'm not very intuitive. They often are more than they allow themselves to be. And part of what happens, one of the great questions that I heard from Alan Lakin is, are you really listening or are you waiting for your turn to talk?
Yes.
And so many times when people are listening, they're just waiting. So they're not there. Right? A lot of communication is asking people and then asking good questions and then listening with your whole being to the answer. Not just your mind.
Yeah.
Not just your judgments. Not just your heart. But your head, your heart, and your gut.
I have to say, what you in your coaching with us, for business, and thank God you've done all the sales because you also give us great tips on that. You said between the lines, listening. Can you talk a little bit more about your personal experience with your intuition in running your business?
Yeah, I use my intuition a lot, and I use prayer a lot. So in addition to praying, who can I most help, I'll pray before a conversation if I remember, I pray every morning, but if I remember before the conversation, I say, God, please guide every word, thought, and action. Please help me to speak what needs to be spoken here. Because when I do that, and I remember to pause, which is one of the biggest things that I teach in all my classes, is that pause that gives you time to think before you speak. And really tune in, not just, well, what was I going to say, or what do I want to respond with, but what did that person really say that I want to respond to or add to, or is it appropriate?
We love this conversation around intuition, and it really emboldens us to trust ours more in the business side. It's like, what would Jeanne Marie do, And so we'd love to hear an example of your intuition with your business and where it might have saved you or helped you.
Well, this was kind of after the event, but one thing that happened, I remember I was doing an interview to go do this big thing. They were hiring several consultants. It was a very big company, and it was early on in my business. I had the interview, and it was like I couldn't get words out of my mouth. It was like I couldn't form words. Now, I'm sure they didn't feel like that, but I got off the interview and cried and thought, I totally blew that. And I did. They didn't hire me. So I was really upset about it, and I went, okay, all right, there must be some reason. But I still, I languished over it. I was like, And then I got an opportunity to work with a premier company. That would have been the dates I would have been hired for that thing. But not only that, I called somebody a few months later, and I said, oh, how was that gig with XYZ company? They said, oh, you didn't hear? And I said, no, what happened? They said, it fell through. But it fell through right as people were getting on the plane, and they had canceled all their other gigs.
Wow.
So it was a mess, and no one had a written contract, so no one got paid. And I thought, thank you, God.
Wow.
So that's an incident where I don't know that it was my intuition or something that just blocked me having a good interview, because I'm pretty good at thinking on my feet, and I didn't understand it. So years later, I still remember that, and I think about that something that gets blocked, there is another door that's opening.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. I will also tell you kind of a funny story if you want to hear
We
it.
love funny stories.
Yeah, okay. So it's not ha-ha funny, but kind of interesting. I got hired by a major company. I'm keeping everything anonymous. And this guy comes up after the class, the person that hired me, pretty senior level manager standing next to me. And he comes up and he opens his laptop and he goes, "Do you believe in ghosts?" And I'm standing there going, he goes, "Well, I paused long enough that he goes, well, I think you do. So I want to show you this."
Wow.
And he whips out this thing that was about extraterrestrials or ghosts or something. And I looked, I said, "Well, yeah, I'm going to out myself. I do." And the woman who hired me goes, "I knew I loved you, but now I love you even more." So we ended up having this whole conversation about God and spirit and ghosts and all of the people that have passed on. And it was just this moment of where I've experienced so many times in my business that I walk into worlds and sometimes I think I'm going in there for one reason, and it turns out to be either something else or way expanded. That spirit has a way of working through me and through them, and sometimes it's just downright funny like that.
Right.
Yeah, I could see the name of your company, Communication Catalysts. I could see you might have named it Deepening the Conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I might take that one.
Conversation.
Well, I think we're just about to wrap up here. We're getting to our final couple of questions, but you've given us already so many tips about how we can show up and most effectively connect with other people. We just wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe give us a final thought on that.
Yeah, thank you for asking that one. Going for connection rather than performance. A lot of times, I know you two are performers, and one of the things you do so beautifully is you connect with your audience. And I've been through several performances, and I really see that and feel that. But a lot of times, people go for perfection. Okay, I have to be the perfect presenter or the perfect communicator, or I have to get it all right. Because I deal with a lot of scientists and engineers and people that are very technically competent, but that's not what most people want, truly. They want connection. And most people want to be heard. So if you can ask good questions, you don't have to, people think I have to know it all. No, you have to ask good questions and let other people bring forth the knowledge that they know to be a good communicator. And that's what makes such a difference. I want to tell you another story, if you don't mind. I use this sometimes in my classes because it was such a stark example of how not to and how to communicate. Years ago, I had my boyfriend and I had moved in together. And one day he looked at me and he said, "You don't really love me." And I said, Are you kidding? And he goes, "No, you don't really love me." And I said, "Of course I do. I do this, I do this." He said, "No, you don't." And our voices were starting to raise. We lived in San Francisco in a flat, so I was getting a little loud, and I went, uh-oh. And I looked at something triggered in me, and I went like this. And I said, "Hang on a second. If I loved you, what would I do?" And he looked at me, and he cocked his head and got a funny smile on his face. He said, "You'd make me coffee." And I said, "What?" He said, "Well, when I get up to go to the kitchen, I always ask you if you want coffee or tea, and you never ask me." And I said, "But I don't think about that. It's not on my radar because I don't drink coffee much, and quite frankly, I don't drink tea much either." And I said, "Well, wait a minute. In the past 6 months we've been living together, every time I get up from the kitchen, have you been like a check mark?
Right.
And he goes, yeah. I said, all right, we can negotiate this. So you want me to ask you if you want coffee or tea? He goes, well, I kind of actually prefer tea. But yeah, I want you to ask me that. I said, I can do that. But what was really interesting, and our relationship went much better after that, but I thought about that, how many times we presume we know someone. And rather than assuming, asking the question, if I really loved you, what would I do? Even a leader saying, not if I really loved you, that could get them in trouble, but but they could say, if I was really being a great leader for you, what could I do differently?
It's huge.
If you were getting the kind of feedback that would really serve you, how would that be for you? What would you like? We forget, and we go into this, I have to know it all, I have to know it all, instead of asking people. And that is the number one thing that I believe creates good communication, good conversations, and great connection.
Thank you. That was huge.
I think you've just saved marriages.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Well, we really do want to thank you again so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's
This
been
was
such a pleasure.
Amazing. Check out jmgrumet.com to get in touch and to learn more about Jeanne Marie. Thank you so much again.
Thank you
Thank
both. It's been
you.
an honor.